Hey, so in today's lecture, I'm going to go ahead and teach you guys about taxonomy. Taxonomy is basically how we classify different organisms and species. There's 8 different classifications. We'll first talk about the biggest and most broadest classification, which is domain. So we have the domains. Next is kingdoms. Phylum. Class. Order. Family. Genus. Lastly, species. Here we have the 8 different levels or categories for the classifications, also known as taxonomy for organisms. So we have the most broadest category, which is domain, to the more specific category, which is species. A good way to remember this order is this really cool mnemonic right here, which is Dope King Philip calls out 50 good soldiers. So more than likely you'll have a test question that's going to ask you to name the order or put this in order. So remember this mnemonic so you could do good on that test question. Now let's get into classifying an organism. Let's look at this organism right here, which obviously is a human. So we have a human right here. And let's go ahead and go through a human's taxonomy or classification. So when it comes to the domains, for a human, we fall under the domain eukarya. And eukarya just basically means that we contain a nucleus. For kingdom, a human falls under the category Animalia. That means you can't make your own food, you have to consume other organisms, right? So we can't produce our own energy or our own food, we have to consume another organism to do so. We are an animal. In the classification level phylum, a human is known as chordata. So chordata just basically means that we have a spinal cord that's connected to our brain, and that's going to control our nervous system. So phylum, chordata. The next classification is class, and for humans, we fall under mammalia. That means we're a mammal. In other words, our mother makes milk and we have fur. So believe it or not, all those little hairs all over your body is considered fur. So we have fur, and our mothers, of course, make milk. In the order classification for humans, we fall under primates. In the family classification, we fall under Hominidae. In genus, we fall under Homo. Lastly, for species, we fall under Sapien. Now that we went through the taxonomy or classification of a human, let's focus in here on the genus and the species, because this is how we're going to get our scientific name. So the scientific name is how we home in on a specific organism, like a human. So for humans, we are known as Homo sapiens. So when it comes to the scientific name, it's really important to know how to write it out correctly, because more than likely you'll see it on a test question or as a test question. When it comes to the genus, make sure that the genus is capitalized. You can either write out the genus name completely as Homo, or you can abbreviate it by just putting the H. It's completely up to you, but just make sure it's capitalized. When it comes to the species, you want to make sure that the species name, which is sapien, is lowercase and italicized. So when it comes to a human, we are known as Homo sapiens. Now that we know how to classify an organism, let's get into greater detail about the 3 domains and the 6 kingdoms. So here we have the 3 domains. The first domain that we'll talk about today will be bacteria. Then archaea. Lastly, eukarya. So we have the 3 domains, bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. When it comes to the domain bacteria, it's going to consist of prokaryotic cells that are unicellular. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus and they do not have membrane-bound organelles. Next is the domain archaea. So when it comes to the domain archaea, it consists of prokaryotic cells that are unicellular. Just like the domain bacteria, the domain archaea is the same. Prokaryotic cells that are unicellular. Last, we have the domain eukarya. So when it comes to the domain eukarya, it consists of eukaryotic cells that can be either unicellular or multicellular. So eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. They have membrane-bound organelles. Now that we went over the 3 domains, let's talk about the 6 kingdoms. So the first kingdom we'll talk about is bacteria. So just like how we saw bacteria as a domain, it is also a kingdom. Then archaea. So just like with bacteria, archaea is a domain and a kingdom. Next, we'll talk about plantae, the kingdom plantae. The kingdom fungi. Kingdom animalia. Lastly, kingdom protista. So when it comes to the 6 kingdoms, let's go a little bit more in detail. So when it comes to the kingdom bacteria and archaea, they are still going to consist of those prokaryotic cells that are unicellular. So remember, prokaryotic cells, they do not have a nucleus and they do not have membrane-bound organelles. So when it comes to the kingdom plantae, it's going to consist of eukaryotic cells that are multicellular. So remember, eukaryotic cells mean they have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. When it comes to this kingdom plantae, they're going to get their energy from sunlight, also known as photosynthesis. When it comes to the kingdom fungi, it's going to consist of unicellular and multicellular organisms. So unicellular can be like the yeast, multicellular can be like the mushrooms. And they usually absorb their energy from their environment. So they're going to kind of absorb it from the soil that they're in. In the kingdom animalia, it's going to consist of multicellular organisms only. And we have to eat our energy. So in order to get energy, we have to eat. Lastly, for the kingdom protista, it's going to consist of unicellular organisms. They're more than likely going to be found in aqueous or water environments. Good examples of some protists can be amoebas, seaweeds, slime molds, and they all have different ways of getting their energy. If you're finding these lectures helpful, make sure you subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one. Happy studying.